teenagers. They're so bad.
What's that?
Yeah,
Jared, I can't with kids anymore. I can't do it.
Well, I told him, I said, he probably will next time. I said, let's fine, because I will not be.
We're going to get started here. Welcome. First of all, I'm going to make a statement here for the minutes under protocol, written council minutes of February 6, 2019. Don Bishop will be the acting interim clerk of council till the decision is made by council to fill that vacant position. Welcome, Don.
Thank you very much.
Welcome, Don. First on the agenda, it will be streets and sidewalks. Mr. Sidoti.
Yes, we have an item here, a city code text change for tree damaged sidewalks, and I assume it's going to be Jim or?
Actually, it's our law director, but yeah, as she started to dig into this, I know the spirit with which council made that motion was to kind of really be very clear to the community so that this isn't a point of confusion. But as no good deed goes unpunished, as Hope started to do a little research on that, she has a little bit of concern, and I share that with her. In essence, by sort of putting it in a statute, you're giving up some of the legal protections that this Ohio Constitution basically provides in terms of immunity in cases of trip, slips, and falls on sidewalks. So it's not that we don't share your spirit of wanting to be clear with the community, but we did, I'll let her tell you more of the details, but there's a little bit of concern on our side for maybe this good intention may have a consequence that we hadn't really thought about.
Thank you. After Ms. Wallach indicated what she would like to see in the ordinance, I did sit down and look at our ordinance, and I drafted what I believe was the spirit of what she wanted to see, and that is if there is a tree that is between the sidewalk and it's in the tree lawn that causes damage to a sidewalk that needs repaired, then the city would be responsible for doing the repairs and paying for them. And I believe that right now that is our unwritten or uncodified rule. Ms. Wallach wanted to codify that, and as I was drafting this language, I put in here that even if we found a tree that damaged a sidewalk, that it would not, the city would not be responsible to fix it immediately. It would be in our sole discretion when we had the financial ability to do it. That if the owner of the property that it abutted up against had some other orders on their property, the fact that we didn't fix our part of the sidewalk that needed repairs because of the tree, it would not relieve them of their duty to perform any repairs that had been ordered on their property. I also added in here that that nothing in this section would be construed that the city is waiving its immunity under state law. And why I put that in there is for many years there was an exception to immunity if a defendant could prove that a city was negligent in keeping its sidewalks in good repair. The city could be liable if someone tripped and fell. Cities for a long time fought that because every city has miles and miles and miles of cracked and uneven sidewalks, and it was just a liability that cities, it was burdensome. In 2002, the state legislature decided to take sidewalks out of the state code, so it is no longer an exception. The city's maintenance of its sidewalks is absolutely immune right now, and I am afraid that if we codify this section, even with my language that says we are not giving up our liability, we still very well could end up in court, and a court could say, well, sorry, city, you codified it, and it's your problem. I also tried to do some research to see if I could find any case law where there was similar circumstances where a local community waived, or it looked like they might have waived, an immunity, I could not find it. I couldn't find any direction for us to go, at least in the written opinions that I was looking through. So with that, and I know you'll talk about this some more, but I would not recommend passing this re-amendment of this codified ordinance.
Any questions from council? Yes, John?
Okay, so what you're saying is you don't recommend that we put an ordinance in writing that says that if the tree breaks the sidewalk, it's the city's financial responsibility to pay for it?
Correct.
Okay, I'm not with that.
Mike?
So the way you have it written here is what you would like us to do, so that sort of, with us putting so much money into our sidewalks, does that somehow help the case a little bit?
I don't know that it does. I don't want you to amend it at all, but what I'm suggesting that if you do decide to codify the city's responsibility for the trees that are in the tree lawn causing problems with sidewalk slabs, I would suggest that you codify it this way, but I wouldn't change the ordinance at all.
Hope if we do nothing at all, the city still has the ability to go out and basically, I think you kind of mentioned that we still have the ability that if we see a problem tree, that we can remove a tree.
Oh,
At
absolutely.
the city's discretion.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Tracy?
So unofficially, we have this unofficial someplace thing that says if the city tree causes the heaving of the sidewalk, then the city will go and repair it at the city's expense anyway. So where is that again? How is that? I forget.
Well, I've only been here since March. If the engineering department or Dave asked me if I thought that was a good policy for us to have, I would say absolutely not. But sometimes the law can't stand in the way of every good deed, if you will. I just would not like to see this codified.
Well, I'm just saying, it's not codified, we just have some like unwritten
Right.
policies. So
Right, and legally, if someone filed suit against us and found out about that and looked at our past practices, of course, they could use that against us, and that might strip us of our immunity as well. But having something in writing in our codified ordinances, certainly.
I understand that.
Yeah.
So, I know, I'm kind of playing, isn't it fair that if the city causes damage to somebody by tripping or falling, that we would kind of be responsible? I mean, isn't that kind of, I mean, with the potholes in the road, if a pothole is reported and then it's not fixed and a car goes through the pothole and gets damaged, then the city is responsible for paying for the repairs
Correct.
of the cars.
Correct, and that is an exception that exists under state law. That if someone can prove that we had knowledge and that we were neglectful, we can be held liable. The state decided to take this section that if we are negligent or we are not maintaining our sidewalks properly, we can't be held liable anymore.
Yeah, I understand.
So no, that's really a legal argument, a legal theory, and how you feel about sovereign immunity, and you can't sue the king. That's truly. I've been on this side of government for so long that I am very much in favor of very strong immunity laws. That's my view. That's the reason why I drafted this. That this is the safest way if council as a whole would like to loosen that this is the most comfortable way to do it.
Jim, would you like to talk about what our practice is?
I was just going to answer the question that it was in 1994, council made a resolution to provide a discount to property owners when the city went and repaired the sidewalk. It was called a discount.
So it's not 100%.
It was 100% discount
Okay.
for tree-related and 50% discount for homeowner occupied.
Okay.
So,
Other questions from council? John?
Well, in that 1994 discussion, of a 100% discount for tree-related damage to sidewalk, is that codified?
No, it is not, but in 1994, the sidewalk exception was still in the state code, so those two work together. Now they're at opposites with each other, so I guess we need to decide which way we want to go.
So, with all good intentions of present day, we'd like to think that this would go on forever, that if a tree heaved a sidewalk, we'd take care of it. But, you know, who's to say in 5 years from now, I'll be here, or you'll be here, or Dave will be here, or anybody else will be here. So given that thought, we have no written word anywhere that says if a tree breaks a sidewalk, somebody will take care of it.
Yeah.
And that troubles me.
Tracy, you had your hand up?
Yeah.
Is that, wait a minute, make it, is that not correct?
Well, you said it troubles you. Okay, yes, it troubles you. No, I
Oh,
don't.
is it not correct that it, well, you know, there's no written word, and there's nothing to protect the residents in that case?
Well, Mr. Bowling is saying that there's a 1994 resolution that indicates some type of 74? No,
94.
94.
I thought you said something.
And please keep in mind, you just, 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks, whenever it was, you had that very lengthy discussion about the 4 options that you want to give. And one of those options is still wait for the city on the tree issues. That's still in the mix. So we're not changing our policy/practices. We're just trying to make sure we protect ourselves, knowing that we don't have enough money to do all the sidewalks all across the city. I think that, and that's what all cities, that's what Hope was trying to say. They all struggle with that. That's not just Kent. There's so much sidewalk unevenness that it got to the point where it's almost a near impossibility to expect it all to be level. So the state said, hey, you know what? Then we really shouldn't hold municipalities liable for that.
Tracy, you had your hand
Yeah.
first, then Heidi.
But this wouldn't be all sidewalks, it'd only be ones that were caused by trees and the city property, for one. And for two, when it was still required that the city fix the sidewalks, how many lawsuits were, can you look and see how many lawsuits were filed from 1994 till 2002 when the law was changed by residents, when the city was still responsible for sidewalks? Do you know what I'm saying?
I can, but I will guess that it's probably not many. It's probably not many, because in my 28 years working in municipal law departments, even moral claims, I would say there's probably less than 2 every 5 years, let's say.
And I would say, just from my experience, you have a morals claim policy that you authorize me to grant up to $5,000. And I'd say I've probably done 2 or 3 in my 13 years here that the law director was brought to me for the sidewalk claim like that.
So then,
I thought Heidi was next, I'm sorry.
but I
Oh,
still
you
can
want to-
finish out the floor. So then, if we chose to adopt this ordinance, probably not many claims would be brought anyway. And we might still not be responsible because we put a disclaimer in here saying that we're not giving up our immunity anyway. So,
That would be correct, but one good lawsuit could cost you $500,000 too. So I just want everyone to know,
Right.
both
I
sides.
completely understand.
And we'd also have to get a hold of our insurance company as well, if we did this, to let them know that there was a possibility that a court could.
right. So I kind of want to think about it some more, actually. I would
Okay.
prefer not to, I personally would not prefer not to make any decisions until we get a little bit more information.
Heidi, I'm sorry, Tracy.
No, I'm done.
Okay,
Thank you.
Heidi?
Yeah, I have one question, but then I came up with another one. So
I'll
who
give you two.
is liable if somebody trips on a 4-inch upheaval?
Well, before the amendment of the law, both the city and the property owner would be brought into a suit together.
Okay.
Now it would be the property owner.
Not very happy about that. What is a morals claim policy? What is a morals claim?
That is typically a claim that's presented to the city that because of immunity, we are not legally bound to pay, but under certain circumstances, we feel a moral obligation that we should pay, some or all of the money that maybe a person had out of pocket. Like, for instance, if it's we don't pay potholes, but let's say if we did, it might be their deductible, just to make them whole.
Okay.
So, if I see a tree's out there starting to lift my sidewalk, are there any ordinances to prevent me from going and cutting it down?
Yes. You can't cut down public trees, and any tree between a sidewalk and the curb is
Okay, so I
most
can't
us.
cut down a tree that's potentially gonna break the sidewalk, but the city doesn't wanna say they're gonna fix the sidewalk if the tree breaks the sidewalk. Seems like something's amiss there.
Well, I kind of feel like we are talking about this in a vacuum. I think that our city is very proactive in coming out and checking our trees and checking sidewalks and I mean, Jim, what would happen if a resident called and complained about a tree that they felt was about ready to break their sidewalk?
If a resident called and complained, Brad from the Central Maintenance Division would go take a look at it. If there was a displacement caused by it, they would do a temporary fix, whether it would be grinding or asphalt now. And then that would come to us and put on our list of known things so that when we're working in the area that we can address it, which may or may not include cutting down the tree. So we could lift it up, cut the roots, try to keep the tree, or some cases we have to cut the tree down. So I would also add that in the right-of-way, we have seen where residents have planted things in the right-of-way themselves without a city permit. So just to assume that every tree is planted intentionally by the city could be a stretch. And also many times residents don't want to see the trees cut down either. So it's always a struggle between a smooth sidewalk and a tree-lined street. So it's never clean. So.
So I'll finish with this. So I have a tree that looks like it's starting to raise my sidewalk, and I notify you about the tree, and I don't cut it down myself. Doesn't that make you then liable for my sidewalk damage?
No,
No.
not based on sovereign immunity.
You got a pretty good deal going now.
Keep in mind, if I can, the deal is for the residents. I mean, you talk about the city's responsibility. Well, the city gets the money is from our residents. So yes, if you want us to assume more active protections and so forth, allocate more money. The way to do that is you raise the taxes. So I think what happens is there becomes a balance point, councils, and you're doing it tonight, trying to figure out where you think the best balance is in terms of what the city can realistically afford and the condition of streets, and do people have, as they walk, is the level of risk. So I mean, I don't want it to make it sound like the city's winning. If we were able to double our amount of, you make it sort of sound like the city's getting over with the residents. He's got the numbers. He can tell you how much we need to keep up, and he could tell you how many new employees we can use to hire. We're happy to do that. If you can give us the money, we'll take full responsibility. It's always been, no, we don't have that kind of money, and that's why most communities, almost everyone, can't keep up with that demand. So the state has tried to help cities by saying, we're not going to hold you liable. And that's a state law. She's just recommending you adhere to state law. She's not trying to do something odd here, I guess. I don't want you to feel like we're trying to do some end around. We're just trying to maintain conformance with state law. That's all. And we're just recommending it to you. You all decide which way you want to go. And that's why she gave you the full, if you like it and you're willing to take that risk, like you said, maybe not many file. Please understand that.
Well, I'm just thinking that, I'm not thinking about somebody tripping over a crack in the sidewalk, because we got plenty of those. I'm just thinking of, here's a tree that's a potential problem, and the homeowner doesn't have any recourse to fix the tree. The city's the only one that has the recourse to fix the tree. Is that not correct? I mean, and
Generally, yeah.
If we go on and tear the sidewalk out to try to fix the cracked sidewalk, we still have the tree.
Jim?
I just want to say that does come up at times. Brad does get called, does get notified, and does take down trees that are
But sometimes we
grown
have to-
beyond the usefulness in that area and that are created such a hazard for the sidewalk that it'll never come back. So that does happen, and we do take care of those things. That's a regular part of Brad's work, and it also a regular part of our sidewalk program. We work together when we see those things, so.
Maybe just cut a root off and hope the tree doesn't
Oh,
die.
or fall over.
Tracy?
Yeah, well, I would like to make a motion to table this discussion for later times, because I would like to actually get some input from my residents to see how they would like to go, because apparently, if we decide to go with this ordinance, then there could be, just like you said, which would you prefer? Would you prefer that the city takes responsibility, or would you prefer that the city pays out money and then we might have to do something like ask for an increase in taxes or something like that?
Second.
A motion and a second. Any other comments to the motion? Heidi?
I have a comment. I think it's wise to consider the other policy that we're working on and how it relates to this one, and I think that I would feel more comfortable if we really did think that through. I know Hope has, but I don't know. We stand in an interesting position as council people where we are protecting our residents. We're also protecting our residents in relationship as a city, so we have, we do need to do both. I know that we're looking at ways that we can support homeowners in keeping their sidewalks healthy. And that's what I'd like to focus on that, and then return to this issue.
Point of order here. Hope, do we have to go to the audience? Because we didn't go to the audience.
No, actually, right now, because there's been a motion to table, it's not debatable, and we need to go to a vote.
You got to right to the vote.
Yes,
That's
yeah,
what I thought.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Well, you're going to speak to the motion?
Can I ask a question about the motion?
Yeah.
Yes.
So a no vote to not table the discussion would mean what?
We continue the discussion.
Right.
So we're just going to continue to discuss it?
Yes.
Okay. And a yes vote is?
Is to table, yes.
We continue at a later date.
When they table it, to untable it, she has to have a certain number of votes. Right? Like, she doesn't
Okay,
even need to make a motion.
Wait, I'm sorry.
I just want to know if there's any other,
That, I just needed a little clarification.
seems good. Any other question or any other comment towards the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion to table for a further discussion at another time signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign.
Aye.
The motion,
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Clarification to the law director, when something's tabled, did it take the majority of the vote to put it back on the floor?
yes,
All right.
That's what I was just wondering.
yes. The motion to table passed 8-1.
8-2. right?
7,
Oh, 8 to-
7-2.
Oh, I'm sorry.
7-2.
Sorry, this is going to happen a lot.
That's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, I'll go right into the finance.
Oh, go ahead, Mike.
Proposed 2019 budget amendments, appropriation amendments.
Clearly, it's a different clerk because Dave Coffey is early in the agenda.
We'll have her trained.
Dawn is saying, what is this about?
I thought I was living right for a minute, but I apparently, whatever. I'm just happy you're here, Don. Thank you. All right. Good evening. I am requesting committee authorization tonight for the appropriation amendments as I've outlined in my memo to the city manager dated January 29th, 2019. Be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Questions from council? Seeing none, anyone in the audience? Back to council.
Move to approve. Do you need the emergency?
It's automatic.
Yeah.
With
Second.
emergency?
Further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you.
Thanks, Dave. You came here for that.
It's the earliest you've gotten up.
See how nice and short he was with his.
Now we'll go to the recreational trail program application.
So this, John's got a couple items, he's coming up, but the first one was the grant application. It was a couple weeks ago, well, I keep saying a couple weeks, feels like a couple weeks ago, it was probably a month ago, that John was here and got your authorization to apply for, I think it was a Clean Ohio grant. And now he's got basically the same idea, just a different funding source, and he's asking for your authorization to do that.
Good evening. In working through the application, ODNR has two primary trail funds. One is the Clean Ohio Trail Fund, and the other is the Recreational Trails Fund. One is state money, the other is federal money. The application is exactly the same for either grant. It's just on the first page, there's a box, you either check Clean Ohio or Recreational Trail Funds. And once we delved into the application process, it was determined that our ranking for the project would be significantly lower under Clean Ohio Trail Fund because it is an existing trail that's being upgraded. Clean Ohio Trail Fund looks to construct new trails, whereas the Recreational Trail Fund looks to enhance existing trails, particularly if they're part of a regional trail network. And the Portage Hike and Bike Trail has become one of the major spines between some major trails. And I actually have a slide to show that later on here today. So it's the exact same application, same project, but we're just asking to apply for Recreational Trail Fund resolution instead of the Clean Ohio Trail Fund.
Questions?
Yeah, I have one. Roger. John, I want to make sure I understand this. So are we applying for both grants?
No, we're just applying for the
Okay,
Recreational
so
Trail
this
Fund.
would be in lieu of the other grant?
In lieu of the other one.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. You can technically apply for both of them at the same time, but they've kind of indicated that it would not rank very well. So we're just going to go for the one that we think we have the best chance at.
So the trail fund would go towards the river?
It would go towards the latest project, the AMATS project, which is upgrading the access from the Main Street Bridge down to the trail, widening the trail from the Main Street Bridge to the Fairchild Bridge connector where it's 10-foot wide. So it'll go from a 5-foot wide trail to a 10-foot wide, enhancing the access at Brady's Leap and doing some other amenities along the way, new lighting, some seating areas and that type of thing.
So just mainly access then, so this
Yes.
Whitewater plan is something completely different.
It's actually work plays into it, so.
Okay, got it.
Further questions? Seeing none, anybody from the audience? Back to council.
Move to apply, I guess, move to authorize the application.
Second?
Further discussion?
With the emergency? Need the emergency? Yes, please. With the emergency?
Second with the emergency.
Further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
That's all.
Community Development,
Are you
Mr.
opposed?
Kuhar.
Okay. Looks like if you stay where you're at, we have the Whitewater Park plan now.
Okay, if it's convenient, you could turn around in your seats to see the screen there, or you could look at the slides you have right in front of you.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's right here.
So in response to Councilwoman Wallach's request, I'm kind of giving you a little update on what has happened since we did this conceptual plan back in 2007. And actually, Dave was very involved. We had the Whitewater interest in Kent was just kind of starting at this time. And so we found a firm. They were actually out of Colorado, this Recreation Engineering Planning, and they came up with a general concept plan of how we could make some improvements to the river and make Kent a more river-friendly community. So the objective of the plan stated, to improve, not only improve the stream bed in putting in boulders and making some enhancements to create some additional white water, it also is to really try to reintegrate the river corridor into the community and to really make it be kind of a signature of Kent. And I think that really dovetails in nicely with where we are right now with the Cuyahoga River Water Trail, which is starting to create not only statewide but national recognition to the trail. So having Kent involved in the heritage section of the Cuyahoga River Trail kind of plays into that initial objective of this plan. The concept plan was a very, like I said, really conceptual in nature, just to kind of indicate the types of features we had in downtown and what potential types of improvements could occur there. One of the ideas was really to develop a park and play kind of concept where you would ride down the river, get out at an access point, either at the tannery or below the dam or right before the Main Street bridge, and then walk your kayak or canoe up and do it again. And so they called it like a park and play kind of concept. The other thing that was really stressed was really to increase access to the river and access points, and that involves parking, and it involves just really highlighting the river. They also came up with a budget for what potential concepts could be involved in this plan, and you can see that in the second section there's about $350,000 of in-stream improvements that they were suggesting. And we found out through funding sources that in river kind of things, there really was no grant programs for that. So it was either, the city came up with some money to do it, or we had a private individual come forward. But so that has kind of stalled. Fortunately, I think there is enough out there already that it's exciting and challenging for a lot of people. So it couldn't get to the level that they were proposing, but we still have, I think, a really nice stretch through Kent here. The other main thing was there was a real serious safety issue when you came through the old locks by the dam. And I guess if I could go back, the old P&O Canal is right here. So you would come through those chutes at the locks, and it would throw you, if you weren't an experienced paddler. It was hard to negotiate that turn because in high water, it wanted to go straight through the old locks, which was filled with snags and hazards. So you had to be a pretty advanced paddler to be able to negotiate that in high water. One of the things we did was, that was one of the reasons why we put a new takeout place right at the bridge there. So when you're coming there, if you didn't feel comfortable with that challenge, you could get out there, you could walk along the trail, and then below the dam we had another spot. So you kind of bypassed that natural hazard. Mother Nature has kind of taken care of a lot of this problem in that this point used to be really refined, and as high waters and floods came through there, it's chipped away at that point, and several large trees have come down and gone down to Monroe Falls, and but it made that a lot less hazardous. The final piece is, in the budget it had about $120,000 to construct a stone mattress there, which meant building up large pieces of sandstone so that when you came out, it kind of pushed you back in there. Well, as it turns out, thanks to central maintenance last year, much of that stone mattress was put in with the repairs of the sewer pipe that went along the river there. They had to armor the bank, and so they actually brought in a lot of, so that's one thing that kind of we were fortunate to have happen. The other thing is improving access, and so we applied for a grant right after we did the project, and that's when, I think it was in maybe 2008, 2009 and did not get funded because they told us we can't do any of the in-stream stuff. So we regrouped and we looked at how can we put together a cooperative boating grant through ODNR to improve access. We received a $250,000 grant that enabled us to build this 12-car parking lot up at Riverbend, put in an access. The parking lot is within 200 feet of the riparian setback on the river, so we use pervious pavers there to not impact the runoff. So that has been a nice addition to get you to the northern end of town. Before that, there was really no place to put in north of Kent. Since this time, the city of Akron has also put in a small kind of primitive put-in place right at their plant too. So there is an additional put-in point that's been developed. The other part of the grant was to construct these access points. On the top left is the access area below the dam, and then below that is the sets of steps that go down upstream of the Main Street Bridge. And they have canoe glides on them alongside so that you can put your boat and slide it down into the area. Another continued parking improvement is the expansion of the tannery parking lot and making a place for the KSU canoe livery to operate out of. That parking lot increased from 18 cars to 36 cars. It also uses the pervious pavers because we're in that riparian corridor. Yes.
This is the actual parking.
That's an aerial of it, yeah, from a drone. And that was part of our AMETS project, connecting the Esplanade into the Tannery Park. We've also, the city has been working over the years to look at additional evening and weekend parking, and through community development and the scene property development, is that a 40-car or 50-car parking lot at the scenes that's available midway right through this project for evenings and weekends. And then this latest agreement with West River Place also is going to potentially make their 30-car parking lot available in the weekends and evenings. So this parking lot and the two parking lots along there, we're kind of solving that issue of people coming to Kent and how do you get, close access to the river. Another project, Another project was to also in access, is at the Main Street Bridge. I'm going to put that down because I'm like getting a little itchy fingers. But at the West River Place, we're looking at constructing a bike stair, and you can see the deteriorated steps on the left that go down. This, we really think, when constructed, is going to be a focal point downtown and kind of a signature to draw people, that, hey, there's something going on down here. And I think, it's a nice enhancement when you look at what we have now. The bike stair is something that the tread on the bike stair is twice as long as a normal tread, and the riser's the same. So it's an easy walk to put your bike in that groove and be able to traverse the steps and get down. Same thing with carrying a canoe or kayak. I think to get it down to that point is going to be a nice improvement, and that's scheduled for this latest Brady's Leap improvement project. Yes.
So we actually have the money for this now?
This is what we're applying
That's
for, the
just the grant.
RTP
That's what I
funds,
thought. Okay.
150,000. We have 700,000 in AMATs, and then Parks and Rec is putting in about 200,000. The other goal of the Whitewater Park was to enhance whitewater paddling opportunities in Kent, and I would say that we've, with the success of Kent State's canoe livery, they've been operating since 2010 every year, and now we actually have two other Burning River Adventures and Paddle the River, two other outside livery operations that don't operate in Kent, but they come to Kent and Yes, Tracy, do you have a question? Oh, I'm sorry. You know, and it's interesting because before this whitewater project, as a side note, there was a graduate class at Kent State, and this was a couple of years before we did the study, and we were going to, I was asking them to do a marketing and business plan for a canoe livery, and everyone said, oh, you can't have a canoe livery, no one's going to want to go in the river or whatever. There was a lot of stigma back then. The dam had just come down. And there was 15 graduate students in the class, and so when I started out, I was talking about the project, and I said, how many of you know that there's a river in Kent? And out of 15 of them, 5 of them knew there was a river here. And now these were graduate students, so some of them were commuting and maybe not full-time students. But I think if you go today and you ask a Kent State student with the prominence of the canoe livery operations through the Student Recreation Center, I think and the connection of the trails and the Esplanade was before that, bringing people downtown and onto the river, I think you'll see that that has changed pretty dramatically in the last decade. The other project goal of this was to create a space to highlight the environmental improvements and to develop an appreciation of the river. And we have a couple annual cleanups every year that people take, I think, some ownership and develop some responsibility for the river when you clean it up. We also do at River Day, we do fish shocking with ODNR, and I mean that bass that he's holding there came out right at the dam there. It was probably a 5 or 6 pound bass. All kinds of different diversity of species, so the river is cleaner than it's ever been. Shortly after the removal of the dam, within 3 years, it was in compliance with the Clean Water Act for the first time ever since inception. So the river is cleaner. I think the perception of the river has changed quite a bit. And like I said, the Cuyahoga River Water Trail, and I think the celebrations this year is going to only go further to enhance that. Another project goal was to enhance some of the natural areas. And this canyon area is really a nice still water area before the whitewater starts, that it's a great place. If someone's just getting into a kayak for the first time, you can go and you kind of feel your way around and kind of get adjusted to things. That canyon was created when they quarried the stone out of there. I believe most of it went to the Main Street Bridge. So it created this natural beautiful natural feature through there. On the left there is the exposed bedrock that comes up behind the scene development. And as part of this project also, we're going to look at how can we get people closer to the river there and possibly develop an area where you could put your kayak in. Another goal was to make the Cuyahoga River a central feature of downtown revitalization and community development, and the city, I think, has seen some recent development there in the past few years, and West River, I think, is looking to do some additional things. So between West River Place, Access Point, and the Scene Project development, there's been some major new development in that West River neighborhood, and they kind of feel like they're left out over there with all the stuff that's gone on downtown. And so everything we can do, to make improvements, particularly to the trail and to that area, I think is received well by the neighborhood there. As part of that project too, we're also going to make the development or the entrance at Brady's Leap a little less steep. Cut that down. Right now it's about 14% grade, and we can get it down to about a 9% grade by lengthening it a little bit. Economics, one of the things of this study was there are, communities like Reno and Golden, Colorado, where they actually have festivals and they have these things around the river. And you can see this is from Reno, and you can kind of get an idea, that they're doing, ours is much longer, but their stretch goes from here, and you get out and you come back around and you do it again, and you just keep making that loop. And we have every bit of that, if not better, in Kent. One of the other ideas of the plan that looks easy to do on paper, is to put a lower trail in there. But when you start getting into the regulations of, developing along the riparian corridor, you're in the floodway, you're in the flood zone, so it's really not practical to put in a path down there, because the first high water, it would be gone. So what we've elected to do is you got to walk up another 5 steps or whatever, but you get up to the main trail, and we're taking that trail from a 5-foot wide trail and making it a 10-foot wide trail. So that will also, I think, make it a little more easier. And that's kind of the existing conditions several years ago. A lot of that has filled in with some of the scrub brush. And then this is just the concept of the Brady's Leap project, just showing it how it fits in the area. Like I said, it's about a little over 1,200 foot of widened trail, the access point at Brady's Leap, and then the bike stair at the other end. The other thing is, Kent is becoming, part of a regional trail network. And if you can see that the Portage Hike and Bike Trail has become kind of this H connector. If this is the H here, we're the crosshatch of the H. Here's the Brady's Leap section. The Portage is a little bit longer through there. But you can see that is connecting major trail systems. The Ohio and Erie Canal corridor that runs from Cleveland. You have the Lakes to Rivers Trail that goes from Ashtabula to the Cuyahoga or to the Ohio River, and this trail continues on the PA Wilds Trail all the way into Pennsylvania. But you can find your way through this network to get to Pittsburgh, and then from Pittsburgh all the way to DC. And that's becoming more of a trend that people are, this can become a little more of a trail town. People take their vacations and they plan out, and I'm going to ride 250 miles, and I'm going to stop at this town and go to a bed and breakfast or whatever. But by developing the whitewater stuff, I think Kent is positioning themselves to be maybe a destination point for people that are doing some long distance traveling. So that's kind of the end of the slideshow. Just kind of give you a little bit of update of where we took the concept and really kind of refined it some over the years, but we think we're moving towards the goal that it originally had.
Questions, Tracy? I mean, Heidi?
The other Tracy.
The other Tracy, yeah.
John, I'm so excited. Question I have is, you're talking about all these accesses, these parking lots. Is part of the grant we just discussed in other committee, is that going to be for some kind of mapping?
Yes, as part of that, actually, we're doing some wayfinding. We're looking at, in fact, we have a meeting later this week to look at some concepts of, how do we brand this so that you're getting onto the Portage Hike and Bike Trail, and that there's a river down there, and so having the wayfinding as part of that is something we're going to looking at. It's part of the grant process.
That's great. And I have another question. Are you involving the Kent Environmental Council at all in the trail planning?
We're planning some public meetings. We have one coming up in March. I think it's the third Thursday of March. So we're going to be soliciting additional public comment. But we've, the concept of the Portage Hike and Bike Trail has been talked about for almost 20 years now, so there's a lot of, but we'll be open for additional comments.
Well, yeah, the reason why I said that was because they have, they take ownership kind of that trail that they helped to build along the river, and,
yes.
As far as what kind of surfacing and things like that, or do you have that level of detail yet?
It's going to be a concrete trail, just like where it abuts into. So it'll be a 10-foot wide concrete trail with 2-foot shoulders on each side.
And that's going to give enough.
That's what pretty much all the Portage Hike and Bike Trail is, 10, right. 2, and 2.
Okay, but I'm just thinking runoff.
Yeah, that's all part of the design process. we hired an environmental design group, and they're starting the detailed design, but we're going to have some public meetings to solicit additional comments on.
Okay, good.
Anyone else? Garret?
So the $700,000 grant, the 200, close to $1 million, is that just for that bike bridge, basically? That's
That bridge
what the
and
cost
and the trail and lighting and other enhancements along it, yeah.
But primarily that's the cost to redo the steps that are there?
Yes.
Yeah. And then my other question kind of piggybacks on Heidi's comment about, signage. What about marketing? I mean,
Yeah.
tying together the ecotourism type thing. It's, we've got all the pieces here now, the vibrant downtown, the university, the river. And how do we market that to get some economic benefits? Have you looked into that?
As far, we're looking into the wayfinding, but as far as a marketing plan, we have not. But that's something, we'd be certainly open to work with Economic Development Department and Community Development and make this really something that we have a piece together there, that if someone is looking at Kent, like you're saying, then, you could say, well, look, these are the types of enhancements we have. So I think that's
probably a great way to tie in the university, Parks and Rec, and the city all in one for everything that's available out there. So be worth pursuing.
Yeah, I do. I mean, just the map idea, that's kind of what I had in mind, was kind of using it as a marketing tool, to help people, guide people to town. Is that like kind of what you had in mind? Okay.
Council? Anybody from the audience? You know the routine, come up, name, address.
Barb Tittle, 909 Middlebury. I saw the price list of approximately 1.3 million, and the Parks and Rec is only putting in approximately 200,000.
That was from the original file. That wasn't from this grant project.
Okay, but still, it's primarily being funded through the city rather than Parks and Rec, and why is that?
How is the city funding?
I thought that's why it's being brought to city council, because you want the city funded.
No.
What do you, then I'm confused. Is somebody, okay, 200,000 would be coming from Parks and Rec, correct? And 700,000 from AMATs, approximately.
Federal.
And then,
150 from North.
what's RTP?
Recreational Trail Program.
And is that, what is that? Who's funding that?
That's through ODNR.
Okay, so the city's not funding anything. Thank you, that clarifies it.
It's like free.
Anybody else from the audience? I don't think you need anything on this, do you?
No.
Okay.
Thanks for the update.
Thank you.
Thanks.
The designs look beautiful.
Thank you.
I mean, I'm really excited. I hope we get the money to make that bike stairway.
See what they did on that.
Nice job.
Who's handling the dedication of West Main Street?
Young lady in the back row.
Yes, Jen is here, and I didn't double check the address, but I think this is the White House property that was taken down. Is this part of that? This is the Claiborne's request, right? If I'm confusing it, forgive me. I forget what I said then. There's opportunity to, the right-of-way, we're going to get some of the dedication of the right-of-way. That's what he's asking for. So go ahead. I'll stop talking.
I can keep going. Yes, Claiborne Properties has come to consolidate two lots, 1106 and 1116 on West Main Street. That's the vacant lot, and Claiborne Jeep Dodge, I think, is on the south side of the road.
Where Garret used to be?
I'm sorry?
Is that where Garret used to be?
Garret Olds, is what he's saying.
I don't know where Garret Olds used to be. Sorry.
I think it is.
So, yes, there had been a building and they had ripped it down. It's been vacant for quite a number of years. Claiborne has bought it. He's consolidated the lots. The 1116 parcel extends into the street, into the middle of the road. Usually when I see that, I ask them if they want to give the part that's in the right-of-way to the city. They agreed, so they're here to ask you to accept the part that's in the right-of-way.
That's the property that had the yard sale in the front of it, correct?
Right.
I think so.
Next to the
yeah.
parts store, in between.
Yes.
No,
Street.
it's on the
Across
other side of
street.
the
The other
road.
side.
Where the Cadillac dealership used to be. You don't remember Shortstop?
Oh, yeah,
All right, just kind of more west.
it's next to.
I'm sorry, that's an old thing.
Next to A&W.
Yes, next
Yeah.
to A&W.
Okay,
Oh, that's.
I'm on the wrong side of the street.
Yeah,
I was on the wrong side of the street, too.
Any other,
sorry, didn't mean to interrupt.
That's all. No,
any other questions
your
from
wisdom.
council?
Stop so we can vote.
Thank you, John.
Anybody from the audience? Back to council.
Move to authorize with emergencies.
Second.
All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes. Next item,
Mr. Wolf.
economic project, development project updates.
Yes, Tom is here to determine whether he gets a raise or not. No, that's right. No, this is, we try to do this annually. We're a little behind, and I guess you can blame me for some of that, but it was a busy agenda. And, you know, I think I've given council a few updates just in general that, you know, there's definitely a good news, bad news, and that's not unusual in this business, right? It's not a business for the faint of heart when it comes to economic development, especially when you're dealing with a lot of mom and pop operations, which are notoriously turn over a lot. So he'll talk about the ones that have been successful, and he'll talk about some that have been less successful, and some projects on the horizon. And I think one of the takeaways from me, what was that, 3 weeks ago now? It's probably been at least that time when you and I went through this, but was watching how what we had hoped that the downtown would eventually be a catalyst for sort of this rings of growth outside the core downtown. And I think you'll see some of that. And he's talking about, you know, we have the North Water Street, and we have, even in the other, well, last night, the Planning Commission was considering a rezoning kind of in the next ring out on Mogador there, just outside of downtown. So we're seeing more and more of that. And, you know, some of our older strip malls are doing pretty decent. I mean, those strip malls are a four-letter word in the real estate business. I mean, it's just not popular spots. But ours have hung in there, and they've found their niches. And I mean, we're seeing some of the new growth is in some of those places. So we're encouraged by that. And I guess it's like the weather, you know, forecasting what comes next. I don't know, but I still like how we're trending. I know I constantly talk to the staff in terms of we got to keep it moving though. I mean, there's complacency is death when it comes to city development, community development. It's still got to be smart, strategic, and all that stuff. It's not, we don't want to sacrifice ourselves, but likewise, you just can't rest on your laurels. Everybody's catching up to us, you know, Cuyahoga Falls and Ravenna, they're all copying our formulas. They got main streets, they got pedestrian oriented, they're focusing on small mom and pops. It's all good, but it's, you know, part of our market share that they're trying to take back from us. So I could talk far more than you care to listen to on that. But Tom, go ahead and talk us through your presentation.
Sure. Thanks for your time tonight. I appreciate being here. This is where I normally remind you that it's not only projects in the city, but it's also in the JEDs. But frankly, almost all the activity this year took place within the city. Really only one project outside the city in the JED. So the agenda is completion of last year's projects that I talked about were on the horizon last year. Some new dining and shopping options, projects that are coming up in the latter part of this year. Some other business news, some things that have happened in manufacturing and other areas, and then just a few graphs, not too many at all. And my strategy tonight was to put some really good-looking pictures of food up here so that you guys would get hungry and want to have the meeting over in a hurry. But this, of course, is Pacific East. I happen to have a lunch meeting here today. If you haven't been there, it's tremendous food. The local guy is Jay that runs the place. Today he treated us to some samples of red bean ice cream. And if it doesn't sound good, it's misleading, it's delicious. I urge you to try it out. This, of course, is Kenko. Probably the longest build out in the history of any, but when they finally opened up, it was worth it. If you haven't been there, it's a fantastic operation. very good food. The local connection is Shang Long Yu, who operates it, and a nice mix of both sushi and teriyaki, just like Pacific East. This one, I love this. This is Woodsy still taking place. Last year I showed you a picture of when Paul Braden was standing in there. This picture was actually taken about a month and a half ago, so he's probably made quite a bit of progress since then. He does plan to be open this year. I think it's going to be spectacular when he does open it. He is maintaining his retail presence on South Water Street. This will be primarily for the studios and for repair and for things like that, and then also for some retail display as well.
Where is it?
This is what used to be the Blue Goodwill store.
Oh, good.
So,
On Main Street.
Yep.
if you haven't been to the movie theater lately, they made a tremendous investment there. Speaking of the strip malls, I'm not sure exactly how much money they spent, but first there's a ribbon cutting on the left, and if you're not aware of it, those theaters are actually branded Movie Scoop, and it's owned by a family out of Pittsburgh. They have 3 different theaters, and they're making this investment in all their theaters, and those are the chairs that are in, I believe it's 8 out of the 12 theaters right now, and soon to be all 12 of the screens will have those chairs. And the only downside to sitting in those chairs is you may fall asleep during the movie. But they don't serve alcohol yet, so that helps out just a little bit. If you haven't been to Madcap lately, they did do an expansion this past year. Primarily, if you remember from last year when I talked about this, they were their expectations were met for the tasting room, but what really surprised them was how many people wanted to use them for event space, for weddings, for meetings and things like that. So that's what this expansion was primarily about. It was both inside and outside, and they've been very happy with the results thus far. It's Ryan and Gia Holmes. If you haven't met them yet, they're a great couple, and they've got a great working atmosphere over there too. And then, of course, we had Raising Cane's. This, of course, was one of the projects in the JED. If you haven't been inside, most people just go through the drive-thru. If you haven't been inside, they have a very cool interior there as well, a nice theme, and people do seem to enjoy the chicken. There's now over 420 of these nationwide. Last year when I spoke with you, we were just right around 300, so they are rapidly growing. Some more good pictures of food here. So this is Burnside Barbecue in Acorn Alley. Opened up last year. This is Emily Hansford and Phil Everett, are local folks. If you haven't tried some of their products, I mean, they are outstanding. They keep experimenting and adding new items, and they do catering, by the way. So if you haven't been in there, I urge you to check them out. This was the optometry building that was on East Main Street. Now it's Farrell Whitehead Physical Therapy Services. If you aren't aware, there's actually 5 locations in the area, so this is not the only location. They moved out of the West River Medical Office Building into this space because they were expanding. The local manager is Jason Graff, and they're very happy in their new location. And it's, we probably prefer to have retail or restaurant, but I thought they did a really nice job putting the windows in, and it kind of has a nice visual, even though it's more of a service-oriented business, but I thought they did a really nice job with that. And then, if you haven't been in the Flynn Courthouse since they opened, and I took these pictures as part of the Rotary Club tour, but they really did, as you might expect, John Flynn did a fantastic job with this. These are just some pictures from inside. They did a great job with the windows, really some nice furniture, some nice fixtures, and it's really just an amazing office space and something we should all be proud of. And then, the work they did on the outside, they did a lot of power cleaning on the outside that may not have been obvious, but when you look at that building today versus what it looked like before, it's an amazing difference. And one of my favorite changes is what they did with the loading dock over there on the south side of the building and turned it into something much more attractive and a place for their employees to hang out. And at the time, the dumpster was still there. That's gone now, so it's a very attractive, both inside and out. You guys did the right thing by selling this to John Flynn. And then
is there any, do they have any plans for like an open house or council tour or something?
I could suggest that to them. Yeah,
I'd
I'm sure they'd be
love
happy
to
to do
see
that.
it.
John and I talked about that. He said anytime we want to schedule one, when the weather gets good, that we can do it before a meeting. He said he would keep it scheduled.
That'd be awesome.
And of course, last year we were embroiled in the Bar 145 legal morass that went on for about a year and a half, and it finally got resolved. And the same folks that operate the Paninis here in Kent opened Barfly, Retro Bar and Arcade. And as you can see, they have quite a few arcade machines. I was very disappointed to not see pinball machines in there. That was my passion when I was young. But these are mostly things like Pac-Man and things along those lines. They also have very casual seating areas, as you can see here, with the couches, the TV, things along those lines. Very modern look as well, a nice kind of austere look. You can see the Kent State theme that's in there. And
How's it doing?
very well. Everything I've heard is, especially as you get later in the evening, it just gets very, very busy, and it's also very family-friendly in the afternoon. So it's kind of hit on both spots.
I just want to make a plug that the managers are two
Yes.
Roosevelt High School graduates, by the way. So it's kind of nice that we have local people running it, and they're doing a bang-up job. So I'm pleased.
And then just to remind people, not only have liquor and beer and things like that, but they also have food there. So there's pizza, fries, things along, nachos, things along those lines. One of the things that really just blew my expectations away was the patio expansion of Panini's really turned out well, in my opinion. And even the renderings they had ahead of time didn't do it justice for how it turned out. And they're very pleased with it, and it's done very well since it opened. And then this, I didn't actually talk about this one last year, but it was starting to happen as we were having this presentation. But the Treno Terrazza patio, that's also done very well and connects nicely with the railroad tracks and the river. This is Novastar Beauty Boutique. It's on College Avenue in Charlie Thomas's building. I'm going to make sure I get the names right. So standing on each side of the mayor there is Sheila Matthew and Deandra Martin, and they specialize in multicultural beauty products. And then what shocked me, we had the ribbon cutting at the Roberts Conservatory of Dance, which is where the karate place used to be in University Plaza. And when we had the ribbon cutting, I'm sure the mayor remembers this, it was still quite a raw space. And a couple months later, I went back and took these pictures that you now see on the right-hand side up here, and they just did a beautiful renovation of the space. And you can see the lobby there on the right. You can see the open dance floor on the right, as well as the seating for parents on the left. I'm sorry. And they just really did a much better job than I expected. This was originally founded in Kent back in 1980. At some point, they moved out to Ravenna. They came back here to Kent, and Carolyn Roberts is the founder, and now her daughter, Leslie Oberholzer, is also involved as well. And they can't be more pleased about being back here in Kent and having the parking they need and the space they need. And again, I think they turned it into a very beautiful facility inside. So here's Handcraft. This is one of two businesses that not only opened last year, but actually moved also last year. So this one started out up in the Parta building. It's operated by Jessica Ryan, and it features locally made or Ohio-made products, I guess I should say. And then she's also added some furniture. So she started out in the Parta building, had some success, but wasn't really satisfied with the foot traffic up there. So she moved down to where Jabor's used to be. And she's much happier there. In fact, I was at a meeting with her today, and she's thrilled to be down there. Her traffic is much higher, and she's doing very well. And they have some fantastic products in here. She keeps the prices pretty reasonable, and I'd encourage you to check it out if you haven't been in there. And then, of course, there's the Starbucks that opened out at 1005 East Main Street. They're doing well. If you haven't been inside, again, most people just go to their drive-thru. They have a very nice interior. It's a very welcoming interior, and of course, they have Wi-Fi and all the things that go along with the coffee shop. I had to put this picture up. So there's some of your finest on the left. This, of course, is the Kent Cycle Tours with the spider bikes. They had to do a test drive, and I commend them for doing that to make sure it was a safe experience for the citizens of Kent, despite whatever it is. I'm not sure what that is they're holding in their hands. And then what you see,
Kool-Aid.
Kool-Aid. And what you see on the right, of course, is some actual people setting off on their tour. And if you talk to people in downtown, they'll tell you they see these bikes coming by quite often. Of course, not this time of year, but coming by quite often. So it's done well. It's a lot of fun.
Are they coming back next year?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah, the bikes are still
They
there.
started late, right?
Bikes are housebound.
In fact, you can actually book a tour right now. I mean, they'll take you out in any weather you want. So.
You missed us in the parade.
Oh, I had almost put a picture of it in the parade. I had that picture, but you guys didn't have beers in your hand in that picture.
Didn't catch us.
We had one of I think our first pop-up. I'm not aware of any other pop-up that we had. So this is the Southern Comfort pop-up restaurant back on October 25th. Mike Beater is entrepreneur and resident of Kent State and helped out these two gentlemen, Will Matthews, who's pictured there, and then Zach Mottershead, who want to raise money for a food truck. And so he allowed them to use their kitchen. They had their own menu. It was just a couple items. They specialize in New Orleans style gumbo, and I can't remember the other item. They raised over $1,800 that night and well on their way to raising the funds they need for a food truck down the road. And again, that's one of the first examples of a pop-up. I'm not sure if there's been another one in Kent, and hopefully we'll have more. I got some of it. It was fantastic. The gumbo was outstanding. Now, in the same location as Handcrafted, kind of partitioned off is a new business called Kent Fabrics. And who you're seeing there is Simone Baskerville, who's a senior in the fashion design school at Kent State. And one of the things that she thought was lacking here in Kent, or anywhere in the area for that matter, was fine fabrics that people can use to design clothing with. And I was shocked when she told me that, because I thought, my God, if you go over to Hudson, it's the world's largest fabric store that, as far as I know, that still exists with, so I can't remember, what's the name of it? Thank you, Joanne Fabrics. And she goes, oh, no, that stuff's crap. We don't use that for clothing. I don't know. Don't quote me on that, please. And so she opened up Kent Fabrics. She's a senior in the program. And what she specializes in is having some very high-end fabrics there, as well as the ability to order those for students that need it for class projects and things along those lines. So very, very nice business. And then this opened on North Manaway Street, and unfortunately, I haven't had a chance to talk to the owner yet. I popped in twice. I caught the contractor, but it's called Sweet and Smoothies. It's obviously they sell smoothies, and then they also sell candy, and it's Flowers Chocolate specifically out of Buffalo, where they specialize in sponge candy. Is anybody from that? So I tried it out.
What's the name of the company?
Flowers Chocolates out of Buffalo. And then the sponge candy is actually, it's chocolate covered, but it's very crunchy, so it's kind of counterintuitive. I expected something soft, but it's very popular in Buffalo. What's it, Tracy?
It's like honeycomb candy.
Yeah, there you go. And so I haven't had a chance to get back in there since they've opened, but hopefully they're doing well. It's in that plaza right, the plaza right next to the, what's the gas station? Clark gas station.
Circle K.
Circle K, thank you.
Markham's.
Now, we have had, as Dave pointed out, some ups and downs throughout the year. So here's some store closures in downtown. And one of the things I want to point out that's encouraging about a list of 8 stores that closed is there's no single reason for this happening. It's almost 8 different reasons it happened. So it's not like there's a trend behind it. It's an unfortunate trend that stores close, but at least it's not for all the same reasons. And I'm not going to go through and talk about each specific reason, but in some cases it was ownership cash flow issues, like Bar 145 back a couple of years ago. In other cases it was, perhaps the wrong concept at the wrong time. In another case, it might have been a new competition that came into downtown with a similar product. So it's not for all the same reasons. Probably what's more concerning about it is the fact that they haven't been replaced as quickly as we like to see. Now, if you look at the Burbick properties, they've been pretty successful, and in fact, they only have one vacancy right now, which is the former Handcrafted. And when you talk to Michelle about the Parta building, probably the reality of it is those spaces are probably more suited towards service-style spaces than they are retail-oriented spaces, just because there seems to be this barrier at DePeister Street, and people don't want to walk up Erie Street past DePeister Street, and so therefore they get less walk-by traffic. And so having the realty company there, having the gallery there, and one new business I'm going to show you in just a little bit, and having the visitor center there are probably good things to have there, as opposed to retail or food or anything along those lines, because also Sugar Rush opened up there and has since moved down to where Fig Leaf used to be on East Main Street.
So now, isn't Pizza Fire coming back? Or is
It's confusing still at this point. There is an investment group that purchased the name. They've already purchased the lease rights to a store in Akron and plan to reopen that. They have told us that the one in Kent is high on their priority list because it was more successful than many of the other Pizza Fire locations, but they haven't acted on it yet. So there is a local investor involved in that I'm sure is motivated to help make that happen.
And the Pizza Fire went out because they consolidated or something, or they just?
It was more of just a cash flow issue with the company in general. And then the other thing I'd like to point out as far as replacing some of those empty spots, particularly in the College Town part of downtown, College Town did go through a transition last year. It was a transition in ownership, actually late the year before. Fairmount Properties continued to manage the properties and lease the commercial spaces until about the fall of this past year. And now that leasing switched over to St. Clair Management, which is the management arm of the new company, and they're using a broker out of Cleveland to lease these spots. And I think part of what you're seeing, I'm not saying it's all of it, is they have to become more familiar with Kent. In fact, they've openly admitted that. And they've talked about, in fact, bringing other brokers from Cleveland down to Kent, because when they go to pitch Kent to these various, various retail options, restaurant options, whatever, most of them aren't aware of what's happened in Kent over the last now 9 years at this point. But certainly College Town Kent, which has taken place over the last 5-6 years.
What's the name of the new leasing agency again?
CBRE. Oh, I'm sorry. The St. Clair Management manages the property. CBRE is the new broker, so an outside broker. So we've lost kind of that personal touch that Regan and Heather had from Fairmount Properties. I'm sure these folks will transition well. They're professionals, and I'm thinking that's part of the lag time, but only time will tell if that's true.
Yeah, one thing that people have asked me, several people have asked me, because they felt like it was being very well supported by the public, is Noodle Bar.
Well, we had two, I'm not saying this is the reason, but we had 2 other Asian restaurants come into downtown. And so sometimes when there's competition, it's survival of the fittest. I don't know if I want to use that word or not, but,
They also had no gluten-free noodles.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
And they weren't vegan either.
No.
Just saying. We need a vegan place.
Grazers.
Razors.
So let's switch over to now we had a little bit of a downer. Let's talk about what's coming. Of course, these folks were in to talk to you a while back. They've been a little delayed in terms of getting their building up at the corner of Erie and Franklin there. They had some difficulty getting the plans in their hands. They did get the plans now. They're working with their own engineer to get them staffed so they can be turned in for review. As a reminder, it's going to be 16 apartment units, and then 2 floors of commercial that will include a restaurant, a bakery, and a wine bar.
That's Vasali?
Sally, yes. And then, of course, there's...
Yeah, and I've had residents concerned about the parking, and I assured them that these buildings would not be allowed to go in by the planning commission unless there was parking spaces.
Well, first off, in this case, there's only 16 apartment units, so it's not a big demand, and they have already reserved 16 spots in the parking deck for their residents. Now, as far as for the customers of the bar, the wine bar, the restaurant, the bakery, that's the same as any other downtown business. That's on-street parking, surface lot parking, that type of thing. Now, the next one is West End Apartments. This is one that Fairmont's going to put up where the BW3 is. In fact, they recently contacted us. They plan to do demo very soon. This one's going to have 59 units in it and I believe 84 beds. And of course, they also have control of the Mandalorian lot that's next to it where they'll have approximately 21 parking spaces. And what they found in Avant 220 and Landmark is only about a third of their residents require a parking spot, an overnight parking spot. And so their parking plan is primarily to use the Mandalorian lot that's right next to the building. To say that a parking plan has to be presented to the Planning Commission, that's true, but in the downtown business district, it doesn't have to be approved. So it's something that actually came up last night. And then, of course, we still have, and I remember, in the month or so before after I knew I had this job and before I actually started working at, learning about the Star of the West Mill closing down and thinking, I wonder how soon I can fill that. And here we are 4 years later. Of course, it took them quite a while to actually get out of there as well. But the reason I put up this particular shot of it from overhead, and the red lines represent the four different parcels that Star of the West owns. The way this is headed at this point, it seems like they may end up selling those properties separately rather than all as one. Their original goal was to sell it, in all once. But it looks like now they're going to sell the main mill property as one parcel and then work with those other three parcels either individually or as a collection of three parcels. They actually have a very interested person in the mill property, and he had a structural engineer in there just a week or so ago, along with an architect, and we'll see where that heads. I just continue to caution people, you could almost give this to somebody, and it's still going to be so expensive to redevelop that it's going to be hard to make the financials work. It's a wonderful building to walk through if you've ever had, except in the winter. It's a wonderful building to walk through. To envision it as residential and office and retail, you start to see a lot of dollar signs in your head as that happens. But then walking through there in the winter, it's like walking through a walk-in freezer for an hour and a half, 2 hours. These really are projects, but I just kind of want to point out that kind of that interest in the mill led to the Better Block project that Harrison and Jim had so much to do with. And I thought that was a huge success. If you haven't seen the videos, I think you sent out links to the videos at one time, but you can always Google it, Kent Better Block. There's one featuring our own Heidi Shaffer as a narrator, and the other one for music and images and things like that. But really nice effort and good way to market the area. And then, what I was going to say, and then what this has since spurred, I don't have any pictures for it, is there's a senior class in the architecture school called Interior Design. And every year, their capstone project is to pick a neighborhood and kind of envision what each of those buildings could look like if all totally out of the box thinking. And this year they chose North Water Street because of the publicity of Better Block and Star of the West and those types of things. And so, Jim, Harrison, and I were in the class speaking to them in the first week of school this year, and then in the second week on a rather cool, rainy morning, we were out reading tours of all these buildings. We had many of the building owners that were involved and talked about their buildings and the history of them. And then since then, many of the students have been in the city offices looking at the floor plans and the blueprints of these buildings. And later this year, and we can make sure you're invited, they'll have their presentations of what they think each of these buildings could look like down the road. Then a couple of exciting events that are coming up. First is the 2020 International Foundation of Fashion Technology Institute Conference in the spring of 2020 in April. We don't have the exact dates yet. But the interesting thing about this is the places where it's been held in the past. So it's been held in the past in London, Hong Kong, Beijing, Taiwan, Amsterdam, Kent, Ohio. And it tells you the stature of the fashion school at Kent State University and the attraction that brings with it. These people have already reached out. They pretty much have booked the Kent State Hotel and Conference Center, or at least have blocked it out for a 2 to 3 week time frame until they figure out their exact dates. And they've already reached out to the hotels down in Brimfield as well. So should be a pretty big event. And then also next spring is the 50th anniversary of May 4th. And, Kent State University has hired a person to coordinate all this, Rod Plowhouse from Streetsboro. He's been involved many times in this in the past. And he's been very good about reaching out to create a town gown link. We have a committee now. He recognizes that May 4th and what happened back in 1970 not only affected the campus, but it affected the city every bit as much. And we're going to be working with him to stage some events in downtown Kent and in the city of Kent, as well as obviously on campus. And as far as campus is concerned, they're looking at it as an academic year-long commemoration. So events will start happening on campus in September of this year, actually August of this year. Probably not so much in downtown until spring of next year. I wanted to find a picture with a council member or mayor or something on the deck of, I couldn't find one, but.
Been there.
Yeah, many of us have been here, but Riverside Wine has been sold to Charlie Thomas bought the real estate. Cameron Thomas's son bought the business, and they're working on reopening that. It's going to be called the River Merchant, and it's going to have a little more emphasis on service and sit-down experience, and still have some retail. It wouldn't have quite as much retail as Bob Morris had there. And that should be open by the summer. Obviously, their goal is to have that open by summertime. And then in the space vacated by Sugar Rush, a new salon's coming in. So going back to that part of building and having services there, it's called Salon Lift. They already have one location in Hudson, or not Hudson, but Cuyahoga Falls. We're stealing businesses from Cuyahoga Falls now. But they're going to open a location there. And then at University Plaza, Ace Hardware is going to be coming in to where Overstock Oasis was. So it's about 13,500 square feet. So that's actually a pretty large Ace Hardware store. And in fact, they call it a super Ace Hardware store when it's that size. And the folks that are opening this are the Metzger family out of Louisville. They've been in the hardware business for over 140 years. Well, not the current members of Metzger, but members of the Metzger family go all the way back to the 1870s. And they've been in the Ace Hardware business since 1993 in Louisville. And then they opened up Ace Hardware in Wallhaven in Akron about 3 years ago. And so this will be their third store. Their son, AJ, so the father is Art. They're both Arthur, but Art the second. And then Arthur the third is AJ. He's the one who will be primarily involved in operating this unit. And they are excited to be coming here. The city's going to be helping them out with a revolving loan fund. Ace Hardware has been great to work with, the corporate office. And that's a picture of their store in Wallhaven. So when you see that, I call it a mansard or soffit, and that sign, that's what they want to put at University Plaza as well. They've already applied for the variance. They're going to need to do that. And they've been just absolutely great to work with, a wonderful family. So really looking forward to that.
When's that happening?
Is it going to spur any further cosmetic improvements down there in the plaza?
Well, when I was talking with them, I encouraged them to leverage their lease, because this is a significant lease, to get the owners to make a commitment to do some investment in the plaza. They weren't able to do so. I'm hoping that all the wear and tear of the cars and for the renovated plaza, for the dance conservatory, will cause them to pave that parking lot and make it a nice parking lot again. But, and then we'd also love for them to have a comprehensive sign package. Jennifer's still here. She's probably cheering back there. And we haven't been able to motivate them to do that as well yet either. So I thought, do you have a question? No.
I just was wondering when they were coming, but that's out of line.
Oh, I just got, this isn't in your package, but I got this today. This just shows the layout of the store. You can just tell by the amount of shelving that's in there how big this store is going to be compared to, well, we have a Ace Hardware up in Garrettsville where I live. This is going to be twice the size of the one I use. So probably closer to the one that's in Hudson if you've been in that one. And what that allows them to do is carry additional product lines like Benjamin Moore paints and things like that. So I'm thinking landlords are really going to appreciate having that here in town. A couple of, they're really kind of small job creation for the most part, but for the first time, and I don't know how long, we've had some manufacturing buildings put up or some industrial buildings put up. So this is the Enterprise Plastics new warehouse on St. Clair. It's I don't have it here. It's 12,000 square feet, and they left room to build another 12,000 square foot addition to the rear of it. If you're not familiar with Enterprise Plastics, it's owned by Martin and Valent Maluch, and they own most of Enterprise Parkway behind our Service Administration complex over there, and they have about 6 different businesses over there doing business in plastics as well as some metalworking as well. And then, of course, Ken Elastomers did their expansion, mostly an office expansion. This probably has more job creation than the 12,000 square foot building that we just saw, but this is a 1,770 square foot addition that should be open and have their occupancy permit very soon. And then on Magada Road also is the Allen Drain, put up a new warehouse as well. It's a cold storage warehouse, but a nice looking new building there on the tired part of Magada Road. And then Euclid Vidaro that you might remember over on Martinell was actually sold to Alsico this past year. Alsico is a 4th generation family founded in Belgium in 1934. They have over 8,000 employees in 18 countries. This is their only U.S. location. They're kind of shifting a little bit from what Euclid Vidaro did with some of the electrical clothing and things like that to more for emergency services, people like fire and police and those types of things. He says he would hire as many people as he could hire right now and go to 3 shifts if he could get as many people in there as he needs. I'm sorry, by he, it's Luke Blakely is the local manager. And one of the things he shared with me that I thought was interesting is he needed to bring in a new manager from outside, and he recruited a woman from Atlanta to come to Kent. And the way he recruited her was by selling her on the idea of living in downtown, and she lives in the Avant 220. So. And then I put this up last year where Joe Zeno had the award, and he actually sold ACS to a company called Strickland. They were founded in 1945. They're also family-owned out of Great Britain. This is their only U.S. manufacturing plant. They have some distribution plants in the United States. So ACS focuses on couplings for large equipment. Strickland focuses on attachments. So it's a very synergistic type of acquisition. And John Gibson they're from Oilville, Virginia, which is outside of Richmond, Virginia. He's the local manager, and he's actually going to continue having his residence in Virginia because he's got kids in high school, but he's going to be up here 3 to 5 days a week, and he also is looking for an apartment in downtown. He says he will live nowhere else but downtown while he's up here. So, interesting to see those things. Main Street Kent and Heritage Ohio honored Ron Burbick with the Outstanding Leader in Revitalization, and unfortunately Ron couldn't be there to receive the award, but it was a very nice award to receive and kind of a lifetime achievement award, as you will. Mentioned Grazers earlier. They relocated from that very small location on Franklin Avenue to a much larger one on North Water Street, and still serving that great food along with those vegan options. And then last year, you might remember I talked about Quality IP being number 50 on the fastest growing list of tech companies in the Cleveland area or Northeast Ohio area. This year, they're number 38. And as you can see, there's a number of other awards they've received. So they have been growing quite fast. They now have 50 employees that are also vendor that we use for the city, and they did an expansion in the silk mill. And so that's what you see on the next page is some of their new office space. You can see it's your kind of typical tech workers, and I just didn't see a ping pong table anywhere, but other than that. And then this, of course, will be out in the JED. This was very recently announced that Akron Children's Hospital is putting a facility out there kind of across from Walmart, in between the putt-putt golf course and the storage location. 28,000 square feet, 15 positions, about 50 medical support staff, and room for another 15,000 square foot addition as well.
So that is in our JED, and they are going to join our JED?
No. They are within the boundaries of the JED. So the way this worked, Akron Children's Hospital didn't purchase the property. A developer out of Canton purchased the property, and that developer is going to put the building up and lease it to Akron Children's. The way the JED works is the property owner has to petition to be in the JED before the business can petition to be in the JED. I called the developer. I got about halfway through a sentence, and he kind of cut me off and said, I'm familiar with JEDs. I have a very strong philosophical point of view that I don't like to burden employees with taxes. And it really was a non-starter. Other than that, he plans to be very much a community-oriented person. He talked about a lot of the things that he's done in other locations. And he talked potentially about making a contribution to the township just up front as opposed to joining the JED. But that's the reality of it. And then just a few before I get to grass, a couple of late-breaking things. You may have noticed Kent Floral now has a sold sign on it. A woman named Linda Boardman, who has Dietz Floral over in Cuyahoga Falls, purchased it. Talked to her. She is excited as heck to be here in Kent. She plans to make some superficial changes at first and eventually some more substantial changes. Just in April of last year, she completely renovated her location over in Cuyahoga Falls. Beautiful location. She does plan to change the name of it. She wants to honor it, but one of the problems she found is when you Google Kent Floral, it doesn't take you to the right links to be able to order flowers through there. It's too generic of a name, if you will. So she is going to be renaming it sometime later this year, Acorn and Evergreen Floral Studio. And she plans to have classes and things like that as part of the experience there. And then just over, and actually you alerted me to this, I didn't know the sign was up, but over on West Main Street where the car parts location used to be, Heritage Barber Shop will be opening very, very soon. I haven't met the person over there yet. I've tried a couple times. There's 4 chairs that have everything in there, so they're very close to opening. And then I already mentioned the Sugar Rush relocation on the fixture. Okay, just 3 graphs, and I think we're done. So the unemployment rate is pretty much the same story as it's been for the last 4 years. It's right around that 4% mark here in the city, a little higher in the county, a little higher in the state. But essentially, that's full employment. The people that aren't working right now for some reason can't work, won't work, or just are unable to work. And it does put a lot of pressure on our employers as far as being able to find the employees they need, and does put some upward pressure on wages. Median household income, this actually appears to be somewhat suspect data. I remember when the Record Courier did an article on this as well. All of a sudden, we had just a sudden spike in median household income, both in the county and in the city. And, some people surmise that maybe a couple millionaires moved in, or maybe the data's bad, but it does show a very significant increase in median household income from 2016 to 2017, all from the same source, and this is adjusted for inflation. And then finally, finally, as far as graphs go, and you may have seen the tax report that Mr. Coffey included as an attachment to the city manager's report. We had the 2018 numbers in, and frankly, they're disappointing. If you look at 2018 versus 2017, we're down $300,000, or about 2%. And these income taxes here are without the police station tax. So this is apples to apples for the 14 years that you see up there. And so when you look at that visually, it just kind of looks like we plateaued there right around that $14 million mark. And, you know, Mr. Coffey, I'm sure will continue, and Mr. Roller will continue to pressure me to find ways for that number to go up. I hear much more from Mr. Coffey than I do from Mr. Roller. But the odd thing about this is it kind of, you know, it contradicts what I hear when I go in and speak with employers when they tell me they're hiring more people, they want to hire more people, their business is more successful than it was a year ago, but somehow it's not directly translating into income taxes. And it's really kind of, it's very frustrating, very frustrating. So just a few conclusions. You know, we continue to see ethnic diversity in the businesses that open, and I think that's primarily a function of having Kent State University here in our city. There's obviously a lot of investment still taking place in the city, and that bodes well. That low unemployment continues to put some upward pressure on wages and strain on our employers. The income tax trend is not nearly as robust as hoped for and appears to have plateaued, and something we'll continue to monitor. And the commercial vacancy rates in downtown is something, you know, I'll keep a close eye on and do whatever I can to help College Town in particular to fill those vacancies.
Gwen? With regard to the commercial vacancy, does that include unused or vacant office space that maybe isn't even, it's just kind of not being used?
I have very little knowledge of the space on second and third floors of downtown. That's where most of the office space is. If it's not advertised as being available, or if somebody doesn't call me and tell me they have it available, then you know, I'm not aware of it.
Do we have a, I guess I'm thinking like with regards to buildings like the Huntington Bank building, where there's upper floors of it that I don't think are being utilized. Is there any way we can reach out to building owners that have space? Maybe they're not paying a mortgage on the building anymore, and I mean, I don't know if that even is a potential thing there, but it'd be kind of curious. It'd be interesting to know how many spaces are actually exist as opposed to being marketed and available.
I mean, we know we have some spaces available, like the second floor of Hometown, West River office space. John Flynn has 1,500 square feet in the courthouse. That's a fairly small amount. Yeah. Now, you mentioned Huntington. I've called their property management department a couple times down in Columbus. They're kind of difficult to work with and have a good dialogue with. But my understanding is the third floor is uninhabitable. Does anybody know that for a fact? And that they do use the first and second floor. And I've been told that, so. Okay, thank you.
Do you happen to know the square footage rental that they're charging on the Fairmont properties now? You know what I'm saying? Because don't they rent their spaces out per square foot?
They do, and it's significantly higher. And I don't know what Burbick's is, and I haven't a vague awareness of what College Town is. I'd probably be doing them a disservice to quote a number. Okay. But it is significantly higher than Acorn Alley and what Ron charges and what some of the older properties in downtown can charge. But you are also getting essentially a brand new building. You're also getting marketing built into what your square footage is as well that you might not get elsewhere. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Wait. I've got a question. John just can't get my name out.
Your Honor.
No, don't go there. Something I hear all the time is, we have a parking deck. And I'm not talking about convenient parking, but there's not enough parking downtown. What's your feeling on that?
Well, you know, we did present a parking presentation to you about a year ago.
Yeah.
Where I thought we had a fairly convincing case that absent special events and so forth, we had adequate parking. Now, we could revisit that and do that same study again, and it requires you to go out and physically count empty parking spots during peak times of days, peak days of the week and that type of thing. You know, what we talked about last time quite a bit is it a real problem or a perception? And, you know, also.
It's a real problem.
Okay, and as part of it, though, the mindset that you want to be able to park right in front of the store or restaurant you want to go in, recognizing that if you go to a Walmart or any big box, I don't want to pick a Walmart, you're probably going to park, you know, 1,000 feet away from the building as well as walk 1,000 feet once you get inside the building. And so sometimes people have to adjust their way of thinking. And, you know, we now have some parking, for example, on Goggler. Is that close enough for people to park and walk over into downtown? In my opinion, the answer is yes. In other people's opinions, the answer, you know, might be no. If council at some point, hopefully not tonight, directs us to, you know, to go through and take a look and do those counts again, we can do that and come back and give that same presentation again.
I've done my unofficial viewpoint of down there, and on a good night when the weather's nice, people are out on the patio and that, the only vacant spots are the handicap. And you need the handicap. I'm not against having this handicap, but what I hear all the time is, and it isn't being convenient, there's not adequate parking. I don't know how any of the other colleagues think. Pardon?
I've never had a problem.
No problem.
I've never had a problem.
Tracy?
I just think people want to park right in front of it. They don't want to walk a block. There's plenty of parking. I've never had a problem either.
See, I'm
You
not
gotta,
get-
you
I'm
gotta
not getting
walk
that
a block
input.
or two, but that's not very far. I mean, it takes a minute.
It depends how you want it. Rogers?
Well, in fairness, because I listen to people too, just like the mayor does, it seems that it is a perception thing. I think that there are, and this isn't being critical, this is just calling it the way it is that I believe that we have an older population now in the city of town. We have a lot of people who have chosen to stay in their homes instead of retiring and going to Florida or doing, you know, whatever. And I think, in fairness to those older people, they feel, they some of them aren't as in great a shape as maybe some other older people, and they feel that that walking 2 or 3 blocks is not, I mean, I've had them tell me that they don't feel that they should have to walk 2 or 3 blocks, that they should be able to pull into a lot that's close to, and I tried to explain to them that we would have to have a lot every block then, a huge lot every block downtown to make that happen. So in fairness, I think they legitimately believe that there isn't adequate parking. And that's the older population. Then we have some longtime Kent residents who have lived here forever, who remember when there was no businesses downtown and they could come downtown and park in front of the bar and have no problems. They have a place to park, and they get frustrated because their habits were that there was always, you always could find a parking spot in 1978. Come on, let's be honest. And this is 2019.
And the question is what, Roger?
Well, I'm just saying, I'm responding to what the mayor said. My question is it really a problem that crosses all of the generational? And I think we have to be adequate about that. Or is it because we've talked a lot about that Columbus Street lot, as a vision of what we could do with the Columbus. Is there any thought about continuing to look for federal grants? I mean, we keep praying that the central government, our national government, would have an infrastructure bill that maybe we could tap into, and it hasn't happened. I don't think we can afford to do anything more with parking on our own unless that happens.
Hey, Heidi?
Oh. I don't really have a question.
And Rollins?
The issue again of parking. I had a conversation with Jim, and there seemed to be those kind of warring thoughts, because Jim's saying that, in fact, it is more of a perception issue than it is actually an issue of parking. We have to do a better job, I guess, of trying to get that out. Jim, is there a way you can explain that better so we really do understand that this is more of a perception than it is a reality?
So do it.
Because I hear it all the time. I do too, but I think for older people.
I think, Robin, what you're referring to is the same thing that Tom was talking about the last time we did the parking analysis, and we went through and took utilization rates throughout downtown, except for extreme events like Beetle Fest and 5 or 6 others, that there is open available parking, not immediately in front of some of the businesses, it's typically a little farther out, and that what we need to do is work on managing the spots that we have available to us and look at opportunities for new spots, which we've looked at pricing out, redoing the parking lot at College, and we've looked at putting in a parking deck at different places. There are no federal grants to build parking lots. They just don't. They're built roadways, not parking lots. And typically, one of the multimodal is a unique one. So we're continuing to try to look for these things, and we're continuing to try to be better. We've got at least 3 or 4 different ideas of ways to better manage and get some spots that are proximate to downtown, and we're working on those now, and we'll continue to pursue that as time goes by, whenever there's an opportunity in place. So.
Heidi?
I have a question now. Have we considered a trolley?
Actually, we have for special events and things along those lines. That lolly trolley that you see for
A hop in, hop on, hop off.
when the students come
Like in
but-
Philadelphia and stuff? You
right.
just hop on it, you hop off, hop on it again.
We have found
Just circulate.
it's actually very, very expensive to operate. And, Kent State underwrites that when they do that for when the students come back to town and they have the, welcome back event. It's probably not something that would be, it would have to be subsidized by city government if we're going to have something like that.
Okay, we're just gonna wrap this up. We have anybody from the audience like to speak to this? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, we need to have an executive session in accordance with Ohio Revised Code, paragraph 121.22, section G, item 1, to consider the appointment, employment, dismissal, discipline, promotion, demotion, or compensation of a public employee or official, or the investigation of charges or complaints against a public employee, official, licensee, or regulated individual, unless the public employee, official, licensee, or regulated individual requests a public hearing.
Okay, roll call.
Oh, did I get a second?
Second.
Okay, thank you. Roll call. Mr. Amrhein?
Yes.
Mr. DeLeone?
Yes.
Mr. Ferrara?
Yes.
Mr. Kuhar?
Yes.
Ms. Rosenberg?
Yes.
Ms. Shaffer?
Yes.
Mr. Sidoti?
Yes.
Mr. Turner?
Yes.
Ms. Wallach?
Yes.
I'll give 5 minutes to clear the room.
Move to adjourn.
We're not adjourning.
We don't have to do that in committee.
We're not in council.
That's right.
I got the Apple Watch.
Hi.
So I can track my heart rate.
I watch.
It's pretty good, but I noticed we're a couple of parts were a little longer delay between, like, I can feel that, like it's
Yeah,
pulling my
yeah,
head.
it helps.